Dan Rice. I am the comms and media lead for Accenture here in the US. I'm joined here with my colleague, Mike Crisafulli from Comcast and CIO. Mike, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Dan. Awesome to be here.
We had a great day yesterday here at TM Forum. We talked about inclusion and its use in AI. We talked about scaling. We talked about getting away from a POV and taking AI into what I think I would call chapter 2. And first thing I'd like to ask you, Mike, is, you've been on the front of AI for a couple of years now, big time. And I wanted to get a sense from you first. Could you give us a sense of your role as the CIO?
Sure.
And what are you doing to approach AI for Comcast in the near term and even in the long term? Guiding principles, true north.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Great to be here. Thanks for having me, everybody. Yeah. So I've had the privilege of being in the role. I've been in the role about 1 year and 10 months now at Comcast. I've been here at Comcast for 16 years. I think the honeymoon was over like 1 year and 9 months ago.
That's a short honeymoon.
It was a pretty short honeymoon, but it's been fantastic. And I have a privilege of leading a team that cares for all the enterprise IT, workplace ERP, financial HR systems, all the workplace stuff, as well as a fairly at-scale software engineering organization that delivers business value through platforms, apps, tools for both Comcast business and residential through the whole customer journey. So pretty much all the software engineering and IT in the company except for like the product space and the core network. So it's really a privilege to be in the role. It's been a great journey. We have been traditional AI ML. I think for Comcast, it started with the voice remote a while back and a lot of incubation of that in a team that is now front and center in what we're going to talk about today. Our approach was really like we wanted to start out of the gate with some premises that we wanted it to be federated, democratized. Clearly, it needed to be guardrailed and cared for from a risk perspective. But also we wanted to, I think, 2 big things. The first one being when Rick is the CTO of the company, we partnered up really, really heavily with the business because our approach was let outcomes drive, what we may focus on first, right, from an internal perspective. So we really approached it from the perspective of, and we'll talk about it more, I think, setting up some guardrails around intake, governance, really heavy partnership with legal and privacy and security, but also have this attitude that we wanted to ship quickly and lean into providing a bunch of central solutions that actually created velocity for delivering that value as we move forward. In parallel to those 2 things, we held a series of sessions literally with the business, so the P&Ls and the lines of businesses at Comcast, and we started off with focusing on their LRP in 2025 and out, and then work backwards to actually say, given what we know about the new technology at the time, we're going to take an outcome-driven approach and solve the problems that we can solve for you with Gen AI. Gen AI at the time we kicked this off was all kind of buzzword and hype, but it was still extremely exciting. So we kind of work backwards into, don't let the technology, look for a problem. Like we were going to solve really, really big, impactful problems for the business. Or opportunities. And then the second dimension of that was more of the, how can we leverage internally for our employees, for our front line. And so it was like a 2-dimensional approach from a business perspective and an internal perspective, an ops perspective.
Now Accenture did a study, which I thought was pretty interesting organizationally. We found that 97% of employees saw Gen AI as a net benefit to their job, which is, I think we can all understand that, but 60% were worried about it in the way it might change their job, worrying about it in a way it might impact them. We also found that 2/3 of leaders they felt they weren't equipped to handle what's coming.
Yeah.
And only 5% of the organizations had a structured position in place to manage what's coming in terms of a training module. Organizationally, with your approach,
Yeah.
how did you maximize that for your organization?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there's some lessons learned there. But aside from, again, multidimensional, right? We had the kind of the table stakes training skills, like internally what we need to ramp up from getting folks technical skills and hard skills. There was a ton of training around how do we intake and understand the mindset and the implications, which is probably one of the bigger, like everything everybody's been talking about, the ethical stuff, the guardrails. Like in my career, and one of the lessons learned I think we're going to talk about is organizationally, I think I underestimated the change management piece of it, not from like a big process perspective, but we ran off and did the approach that, we just talked about. And in retrospect, it's worked out really well. Organizationally, we did literally do a bunch of things fairly quickly. We created a central solutions AI team that I think we'll hit on it later, is really enabling the federation of the AI. So organizationally, we took our AI and ML team, that has been in place for tens of years, and we kind of reimagined that team to then focus on what is all the infrastructure and all the things that will accelerate the experimentation for our employees, for our tools, for the business, things I talked about earlier. So we stood that team up and immediately started central solutions around sandbox LLMs, guardrailing, prototyping, data management. The second thing we did is, in my organization, we actually created a new domain. It was in our group. The software engineer teams are structured in business domains, sets of like capabilities and platforms and business value for domains that roughly line up to the business. This is a domain we set up called the AI experience domain, because we needed to build now a bunch of foundational platforms for the customer journey and for all the business value you want to deliver. We restructured our existing teams to literally restructure and build an organizational component that is going to deliver on all the foundational things that we're going to want to leverage as all this stuff shows up to the customer or to the frontline team. And then I would say the other thing we did from an organizational perspective was, and I would say this is the bigger one, is it's changing the way that we actually do our agile SDLC. Like, we're reimagining. There's all the consumer-facing stuff that we talked about, which I would say, at least for us, is getting started. There's a big frontline component of Gen AI that we shipped in the first 90 days that's having a really big impact for our frontline employees, retail, care, that is super exciting and is out there already. And then the third element, the third dimension for us, the fourth dimension would be like workplace, right? Like Copilot and all this stuff, if you are probably using some of that already. That third dimension is internally, organizationally, we are rethinking the way that we do literally software development. And it's not just about Copilot. Like, Copilot's great, GitHub Copilot. I don't know if you all have been used that or exposed to that. There are component tools like that and some others. We are stitching the ecosystem together to reimagine the flow of work and the roles in the SDLC as we actually develop software. And to be candid, of all the things that we've shipped, probably except for the frontline tool piece, the AMA piece, which has been super impactful from a product perspective, an NPS perspective, for me, this kind of surprise journey was how real Gen AI is going to change the way that we develop software to deliver value. And it's the whole flow of work. It's not just about code optimization or testing or automating documentation. We're using it to actually redefine roles in the SDLC, and we cut down our go-to-market on our development in some cases by 3 or 4 months. So it's been an amazing, that has been, the business side stuff of what we're doing is fantastic, and it's starting to show results, especially in like things like retention and care and some other areas. I would say the most real part, and a surprise for me, when I met with the teams and they started to demo how they want to change the way that they develop software, I was like, oh my God, like, this is real. Like, it's the first, I've been doing this for a long time, more than I've just been at Comcast. And it literally was like, this is going to change the way that we work as a very large software engineering organization. That for me is what's most upfront because it involves people and change management. And it's super exciting because the teams are super excited to work in this environment where the process is lighter, the developers are more upfront. It's more of a developer-centric model. And then the go-to-market is quicker. And so when we look at our 400 list of programs, the team isn't so daunted anymore. They're like, we now have this whole ecosystem and what Gen AI is going to do for us to deliver value quicker. And the development teams end up really enjoy working in the environment. So that for me is like the next wave. And then on top of that, which is super exciting, is all the employee experiences and the things we're going to do for the business that are really going to have an impact. They're a little bit slower in showing up, just as you can imagine, because we put up automated sales, Gen AI-based things in front of like Comcast Business. Like we have to be super careful, about the guardrails and all that stuff. But the internal stuff is really moving fast. So it's super exciting.
And with that speed, you can do more in the business. You can do more
Absolutely.
business value. Now,
Yep.
business value, I think early in our industry, you see a lot of care, you see a lot of network, you see some marketing. I mean, it's pervasive. This technology touches all parts of our business. Where are you going? Where are you focusing?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great point, and you kind of hit on in the beginning too. In my role, a ton of my time is spent on just alignment, right? Like I sit in between all the business value our teams need to deliver, and then clearly like the outcomes in the business, and my partners in the business who have to drive, retention, sales, employee experience, handle, digital containment, all those things. When this all kicked off, it wasn't just like, it was the first time, at least at Comcast, where I won't say everybody became like a technologist overnight.
Yeah.
But it was great.
Everybody thought they did.
No, which is great because it just generated all these ideas, which again goes back to, how do you harness that without slowing everybody down? But the ideas just started to flow, and they all started, presenting, the business started to present how they want to leverage Gen AI in those sessions that we talked about with, the LRP and all that. But for us, we really come back to the outcomes, right? Like, so in the things where we have a lot of experimentation and things like Lab Week and Spark, and then we have the employee experience, the internal employee experience, workplace stuff, some of the big impact internal things that I mentioned around the software development and core operations. And then for the business, we really are focused on, it shows up in value. It's showing up in like digital containment. It's really going to leverage some new capabilities for us to, with that digital containment, which has been a challenge, at least for us, is sometimes the resolution is not so good, right? And the containment is good, but the transactional NPS, the net promoter score, is low. So for example, in the care organization for self-service, we're going to deliver a bunch of capabilities that are going to drive that containment up. But one of our key outcomes in a KPI is we're not successful unless the TNPS goes above a certain score for those intents. So Gen AI is going to enable that, but that's great that they were able to talk to a bot and the bot was empathetic and all that stuff. But if they didn't get the issue resolved and they just got in a loop and we weren't able to give them a good experience, who cares, right? So our business approach, on top of what I mentioned earlier, is really, really agreeing, and we've had great partnership with the business. Like literally, most of the things that we do for the business and for the consumer has core set of KPIs to them, and a foundational roadmap that leads up to when we're actually going to deliver on those moving into next year.
How do you handle the risks of Gen AI? We talked a lot about our AI. We talked a lot about the protection of security of your data. We talked about protection of intellectual property, yours and others, as they enter large language models. What are you doing organizationally and from a technology perspective to protect yourself?
Sure. No, it's huge. I would say and maybe we went a little bit too slow at first, but I'd say we went slower first to go faster now. Two big dimensions. One is we immediately created, and I know this sounds really heavyweight, it actually wasn't too heavyweight, but we created a council that was inclusive of our privacy, our legal, stakeholders, our strategic development, the technology organization, and it was around intake of new AI that we want to actually deliver, especially to our consumers, but elsewhere, in parallel to allowing for that experimentation and all the things that I mentioned before. But I would say where we went a little bit slower to go faster was this investment in central solutions that I mentioned before, where the AI technology team is enabling the AI as a service to the rest of the organization. And when you do that, they're building in the privacy, the data quality, the data engineering. One of the big things is they pre-create a bunch of LLM sandboxes. They, using the RAG architecture, they kind of plumbed and make it super easy to deploy, like guardrails and things like that. So that shipping objective that I mentioned earlier, even though it seemed really slow for the first couple months we were doing this, now I see the velocity of like how we're deploying our Ask Me Anything Gen AI tool.
Kind of the flywheel now.
Yeah, like we rolled it out to a small set of like inbound sales agents. And then as this team started to deliver this AI as a service infrastructure, I see the deployments in that AMA infrastructure to our retail agent stuff. It's going like 5 times quicker than it did when they're all having to do some of that stuff themselves while I was getting set up. So through those solutions and through taking the approach that we're going to build in that security and risk in as much of the technology as we can, so people aren't all trying to do their own thing. Right. It may create a little bit of an extra process, but at the end of the day, when they go through that, it's much quicker on the other end to get deployed and to ship. And they don't spend as much time reviewing all the hallucinations or all that other stuff with legal before they want to like release the product. They're just double checking on stuff versus like starting from scratch every time. So it's really been a big enabler of velocity.
So in the last 3 minutes, I love asking, these are my 2 favorite questions. Mine are you've been at this Gen AI, complete reinvention of what you're doing. You guys are in the top 8%. Accenture did a study of 2,000 companies. You're in the top 8% of truly reinventive leaders, and congratulations for that. What has surprised you in the last 2 years with generative AI? And second question, if you could give yourself advice 2 years ago, what would it be?
So it's still, as far as surprises go, I would say, because in my role as well, like the people aspect of it at scale is such a big deal every day, all day. And given the pace of the technology has been incredible, all the hype and the buzzword and the reality though, where it lands for our people, is the way that I think it's going to change our work is really what my big surprise was. It's cloud changed the way we worked, right? Abstracting infrastructure changed the way we work. This is, as I see this we really do this in some parts of the org, what surprised me was literally how it's going to change the way that we work internally. I know it's going to have a bunch of changes for the business and for our consumers, but what's been more front and center and something super tangible, not even in the hype cycle, but true reality here in front of us, is how do I manage that at scale with roles changing, the flow of work changing. It surprised me how much more velocity we're going to get, and how much the way we develop software is going to change in the end-to-end SDLC again, in the agile lifecycle, not
like
just
in the everyday.
In the everyday. And so that was a surprise. And when I got a couple demos from the team on how they are leveraging this for a couple of big POR, plan of record programs, and they showed me the NPS of the developer happiness, and they showed me the velocity improvements, that was a big, I was shocked. I was like, this is real and this is here.
It's today. It's right
today,
right now.
And it's gonna enable a bunch of velocity now. Granted, it's not like as maybe fast as we would like to go with some of the consumer stuff we're doing, but it's here now. And then I would say any advice would be, I think the approach worked, investing in essential solutions. I think I would have probably done a little bit more. The passion from the team was so incredible. Everybody just wanted to lean in and get started and start delivering value. And then at the same time, I mentioned we were setting up some of these central teams and intake, And I feel like there's some lessons learned there around like probably could have balanced the speed of that quicker and engaged our employees more in what we're doing. So I would have done a little bit more on bringing them along sooner on, even though everything wasn't fully baked. But I think we landed in a really great spot.
Great. Well, Mike, look, thank you. You're a great leader of our industry.
No, thanks, Stan.
It's been a credit to have us here with you today.
No, thanks
We
for having
appreciate
me.
it very
Yeah,
much.
it's been a privilege. Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.